There was no gentle beginning, no tender first kiss or whispered question about readiness. He simply stripped away his shirt, loosened the weight of his silence, and claimed what he felt was rightfully his. Not with cruelty, but with finality. Like a businessman completing a deal rather than a man embracing a woman. And I shed no tears. Not in that moment, because beneath the fear, something different had started to kindle. If that opening moment raises questions you're dying to have answered, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales that start in darkness and finish. Where you least expect them. No one bothered asking for my consent to the journey. No suitcase was packed for me. They simply dispatched the car along with its accompanying hush. It gleamed black and endless, polished as if it had never touched ordinary streets. I settled into the rear seat with a manila folder resting on my thighs, my palms still sticky from flour I hadn't scrubbed off after my morning shift at the bakery. Inside that folder lay a letter bearing my father's signature and 2 sentences scrawled in navy ink. You're the final thing I can give. He'll handle everything else. The signature read not Dad, but Edward Bennett, like a man sealing a business transaction. As the car pulled further from our town, the wind seemed to transform, growing sharper and more ravenous, as though it had developed fangs. Mist wrapped around pine trees while damp leaves slapped the windshield like omens. I quit asking about our destination after catching the driver's startled glance in the rearview mirror. We traveled for what felt like endless hours until the landscape dissolved into rocky precipices and ocean. The road grew narrow, then vanished entirely, and there stood Ashridge, the mansion perched like an unspoken word, uttered once but too weighty to repeat. Tall and weathered by decades, with stone walls that devoured light and windows resembling eyes that had witnessed far too much. Wild ivy strangled the eastern wing, choking the ancient chimneys as if attempting to lull the entire structure to sleep. Behind me, the car door clicked open. The driver didn't linger. I stepped into the wind and it pressed against my chest, like an invisible hand. Still, the front entrance remained sealed, towering oak, waiting. I didn't rap on the door. I stood there 1 minute, then 2. Then it swung open. He offered no greeting, didn't ask for my name. He simply studied me like someone expecting a package, but receiving a living person instead. You're the Bennett girl? I nodded, clutching the folder like a weapon. Clara, I said. Clara Bennett. His eyes never blinked. Names are brief, debts are lengthy. Then he pivoted and walked inside. I followed not from obligation, but because the wind at my back offered no alternative. Ashridge's interior was more frigid than outside. Not temperature-wise, though. My bones did ache, but an emptiness. The walls stretched impossibly high, the ceilings beyond reach. A grandfather clock ticked as if conversing with no one. The lighting was dim, not golden, but amber, like aged teeth. He guided me past a fireplace that appeared unlit for years, past a portrait of a woman whose mouth was too rigid for smiling and whose eyes tracked me even when I looked away. I wanted to ask if she was his mother. I didn't. I was still struggling to breathe normally. You'll occupy the eastern room, he said. His voice was deep, not harsh, just incomplete. As if every word had to battle its way out from his ribs first, I nodded. Again, I seemed to have lost my capacity for complete sentences. You'll have meals, warmth, peace. I won't disturb you. Don't disturb me. Just like that, we established a contract, not a marriage, not a home, not even a shared existence. Just a truce. The eastern room sat atop a narrow staircase that groaned under your weight as if keeping score. The corridor smelled of cedar and cold metal. The wallpaper curled like old skin, and my room's door lacked both lock and handle, just a pull ring. Ancient and brass, cool against the palm. Inside, the space was sparse. A bed, a desk, a solitary lamp on a dresser, a window facing the cliffside with shutters. The only thing that seemed deliberately chosen was the folded blanket at the bed's foot blue wool. Clean, perhaps still holding warmth. I turned around, and he had vanished. I sat on the mattress, folder still in my lap, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. I reopened it. No terms, no schedule, no warnings, just a single page. In settlement of outstanding debt, accepted in full. Signed by my father, co-signed by Lucian Vale. That was his name. I hadn't known it until that moment. That night, I didn't unpack. I didn't weep. I didn't dream. I lay motionless like furniture and listened. Somewhere in the house, a door shut. Elsewhere, footsteps paused, then didn't resume. In the darkness, I pulled the blanket to my chest. It carried scents of ashen, something familiar I couldn't identify. Not cologne, not smoke. Memory not mine. I didn't know then what manner of man Lucian Vale was. Only that he lived solitary on a cliff and opened his door not with a smile, but like he was admitting a ghost. And I wasn't certain if I had died a little to walk through it, but I remember this. Before sleep took me, I glanced at the empty corner of the room and thought, this place doesn't want me. Then I remembered how he had looked at me and thought again, maybe it wasn't the house that was waiting. Maybe it was him. The door wouldn't budge, though they hadn't locked it. The eastern room was supposedly mine, yet it felt borrowed. Kind of space someone keeps ready for a person they hope never returns. Nothing was damaged, but nothing welcomed me either. The windows wouldn't open. The dresser drawers were empty except for a single brass button and a folded handkerchief embroidered with someone else's initial. I spent the morning pacing the rooms. Perimeter, 3 walls, 1 window, no mirror. I attempted the shutters. They protested but remained sealed. When I pushed too forcefully, dust billowed into my lungs like breath long held, and suddenly released. No knock came. No breakfast tray, no voice from the hallway. I was unmistakably alone. It took until midday to gather enough courage to leave the room. I didn't understand the rules. Weren't wives supposed to understand the rules? Then again, I hadn't experienced a wedding, just a signature and a stare that still lived behind my eyes. The hallway outside was silent, but not still. There's a type of quiet that feels like eavesdropping, and Ashridge held that kind of hush-like. Every wall had been waiting years to hear someone's footsteps again. Mine were soft, barefoot, from defiance or fear. I wasn't certain. I passed a long mirror draped in white cloth. The fabric shifted slightly as I passed, though there was no breeze. I discovered the kitchen by accident. It was sunken and aged, filled with copper pans, and the lingering scent of something burned, eggs, perhaps, or a memory. A cast iron kettle rested on the stove, cold. There was a single teacup in the sink, and beside it, a spoon still damp. Someone had been here recently. I turned toward the garden door just to feel something open, but it was secured with a chain that had rusted into place. Through the dusty glass pane, I saw the sea gray and churning, beating against the cliff like a slow, steady heartbeat. I remained in the kitchen for an hour, pretending to search for tea. I think I simply needed proof the world still contained. Color, Ashridge muted everything: sound, light, even memory. There were no family photographs, no laughter buried in corners, only objects stripped of meaning. Except the piano. It sat in the parlor, tucked against the west wall, upright, closed, and silent. I ran my fingers across the dust on its surface. Not to play it, just to leave a mark. Don't touch that. I spun around. Lucian stood in the doorway, not angry, just present, like he'd always been there. I wasn't going to play, I said. That's not the point. He walked past me and wiped the piano clean with his sleeve, like it mattered, like it still belonged to someone who cared about its appearance. "Do you play?" I asked. He didn't answer. He sat on the edge of the old velvet armchair and gazed out the window. I followed his gaze. The sea was hurling itself against the rocks like it wanted to disappear. "That piano used to fill this house," he said, voice lower than before. "Now it makes silence louder." I didn't respond. What could I say to that? What do you say to a man who speaks in riddles you're not sure you want to understand? Instead, I asked, was she a musician? He looked at me, then really looked, and I saw it. The flicker. Not pain, exactly. Regret, or maybe something too ancient for a name. "She used to sing," he said, "but never here." Then he stood and walked away. That night, I found the coat. It was draped over the back of the desk chair when I returned to the eastern room. My own cardigan was still lying on the bed. I hadn't left the room wearing anything but that, but this coat was heavier. Wool worn at the cuffs, lined with something that had once been satin. It didn't smell like him. Not quite. It smelled like before him, like old books, rain on stone, the ghost of tobacco. There was a note folded in the inner pocket. No signature, just a sentence. "It gets colder." At night, I pressed the paper to my palm. My heart beat once, hard, then continued as if nothing had happened. I didn't see him the next day or the one after, but I knew he was there. In the way the fireplace stayed warm, though I hadn't lit it. In the way the kettle began to whistle just when I needed it. In the sound of boots outside my door, never stopping, never knocking that, he was giving me space. Or maybe he was circling the edge of something, afraid to fall in. I started writing again. Just small things, lines in the margins of a recipe book I found in the kitchen drawer. Not poems, not stories. Confessions I used to hum when I was afraid. I don't remember the sound of my mother's voice. I want to belong somewhere, even if it hurts. I didn't know if he'd ever read them, but I left the book open on the table anyway. On the fourth night, I couldn't sleep. The room was too warm, the blanket too soft, the coat still draped over the chair like a second spine. I opened the window. The wind hit me full in the chest, salt and darkness. Below, the sea moaned like something wounded. The cliff edge just beyond my sight, and then a single light moved in the hallway below. Not flickering, just steady, like someone walking with purpose. I waited, but no one came. That was when I knew. He was watching, not to own, not to haunt. To protect, but only if I let him. And I wasn't sure yet if I wanted that kind of safety, the kind that comes with a cost. The house had too many doors. Some led nowhere, just closets without shelves, rooms without windows, a stairwell that ended in a brick wall. Others refused to open at all, sealed as if whatever was inside had been told never to emerge again. But the worst was the door that wouldn't close dot. It was at the end of the north hallway, just past the conservatory with the glass roof, half shattered by wind. I found it by accident. I'd gone searching for sunlight, but the day was gray again, and the garden path was slick with saltwater spray. When I turned back, the wind pushed the door open behind me, a slow, steady moan of hinges that hadn't been touched in years, and it stayed open no matter how hard I tried to shut it. Inside was a small sitting room, dust thick on every surface, a chair draped in white cloth, books stacked like they'd been left mid-sentence. A single teacup on the windowsill cracked. A coat women's still hanging behind the door. The air was heavier here. Not colder, not musty. Just watched dot and then I saw it. A photo face down on the side table, half covered by a brittle page of sheet music. I turned it over. She was beautiful. Dark hair, bare shoulders, mouth turned just enough to suggest she hated having her picture taken. She was sitting on a stone ledge with the sea behind her. The sea, this house, She'd lived here, maybe, or been kept here. I put the photo back face down. Some things are better left undisturbed. That night, I found Lucian in the study. It wasn't locked. He wasn't drinking. He was just sitting fire low, jacket off, his shirt cuffs rolled up, veins visible beneath the skin. I stood at the door like I had something to say. I didn't. He looked up. Only once. You went to her room. I didn't ask who. I didn't need to. The wind pushed the door, I said. He nodded as if that made sense. It never stays shut, he said. She was always the one leaving, even before she actually did. I waited for him to say more, for him to tell me what happened, where she went. If she died, if he lost her, if he let her go. He didn't. Why keep it open? I asked. He turned to the fire, voice lower now. Because I wasn't the one who closed it. I didn't know what to do with that, so I stepped forward, sat across from him. Let the quiet stretch. Do you miss her? I asked. A pause. His jaw tensed, his hand gripped the armrest tighter, knuckles sharp. Against pale skin, no. The kind of no that meant yes. Or worse still, I should have left. That was what a smarter woman would have done. But I stayed. What did she leave behind? I asked. Lucian looked at me then, really looked. As if weighing what I could hold, what I could understand. Everything, he said finally. Everything she said she'd take. He leaned forward. The fire lit his face in orange shadow. I gave her. This house, this cliff, this silence. And it still wasn't enough. I swallowed, my hands folded in my lap. And me? I asked. You're not her, but I'm in her place. He said nothing, just reached for the glass on the table, lifted it halfway to his lips, then set it down again. Later, I walked the hallway again, not to find her, to find me. The woman in the photo had once taken up space here. Her voice had echoed. Her scent had lingered. I wasn't trying to become her. I just needed to know how not to disappear the way she did. That night, I left the eastern room door ajar. A test, a signal, a surrender dot at some point. I heard his steps measured, heavy, not hiding. He paused outside. The floor creaked. I waited. He didn't enter, but when I woke in the morning, the coat I'd left on the chair was gone and replaced by a book, a poetry volume, worn spine, one-page dog-eared. I opened it to the underlined passage. You are not the echo of a voice. You are. The silence she could never hold. The next afternoon, I found the door had closed, her room locked from the inside. No key, no wind. Just quiet Dot, and for the first time, it felt like maybe not all doors have to stay open to be remembered. Dot it was. The kind of cold that lived under your skin, the kind that crept into the marrow and whispered, "You're still alone, aren't you?" The storm rolled in without thunder, just wind wet and whispering against the windows like a secret no one wanted to keep. I lay in bed listening to it. The house creaked. The shutters moaned. Even the walls seemed to breathe. I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I couldn't tell what I wanted more, to be left alone, or to be found Dot around midnight. The lights flickered, then went dark. No warning, just a sigh and then absence. I sat up. The coat he'd given me was still draped over my shoulders. My hands clutched the book he'd left me, still open to the line that had unknotted something in my chest. You are the silence she could never hold. I hadn't heard his footsteps tonight. No hallway creak, no kettle whistle. Just dark and the sea outside Wilder now, crushing like it had something to say and no language to say it in. I lit the candle on my desk. It flickered hard, then settled into a quiet flame, and then I heard it, a door opening. Not mine, but close. Then another sound. Not footsteps, breath, shallow, drawn tight. I stepped into the hallway, the candle cupped in both hands. The air felt different, charged, like standing near something that might bite or break. Lucen stood at the end of the hall, shirt undone at the collar, eyes glazed not with drink but something deeper. He didn't see me at first. His hand was pressed flat against the wall, as if he needed the house to hold him upright. Lucien. He turned slowly, not startled, not angry, just there. He looked at me like someone waking up from a fever. The lights went out, I said, voice quieter than I meant. They do that sometimes. He murmured, dealt another pause, a breath, then from him, I heard your door open. I thought I heard something. You did. We stood in that stretch of hallway 10, maybe 12 feet apart, but it felt like an entire childhood. Every time I'd been left behind, every moment I'd swallowed instead of asking to stay. And then he stepped closer, not quickly, not with purpose. Just one slow step, like he was testing if the floor would forgive him. You didn't call for me, he said. No. Why? The candle wavered. My fingers felt the wax start to pool. Because if I said your name, I whispered, I would have needed you to answer. That stopped him. Something in his face fractured subtly. A shift in the way his eyes softened, or maybe how his jaw unclenched. He stepped once more, now close enough that I could feel it, the heat of him. Not his skin, his ache. It pulsed off him like light from a fire you hadn't dared sit beside. He raised a hand but didn't touch me. His fingers hovered just above my cheek. 1 inch, maybe less. You don't have to ask, he said, and still he didn't. Move closer. He left the space, the choice, and for the first time I reached. I leaned forward, not into his hand, but his presence, letting my forehead rest against his chest. No arms, no pull. Just breath. His shirt was cold with the sea air, but his heart was steady beneath it, one beat, then another. A rhythm, something I could count. He didn't hold me. He let me stand there against him until my breathing slowed, until I felt the tears gather behind my eyes, but didn't let them fall. And then he stepped back. His hand finally touched my hair, just once. Then he turned away, not as rejection, but as surrender. I returned to my room, left the door open. He didn't come back, but before dawn, when I rose to close the shutters, I found something on the windowsill, a matchbox, and beneath it, a slip of folded paper. In his handwriting, I didn't answer because I didn't want you to need me. I wanted you to want me. I didn't light the candle again that night. I let the dark wrap around me, let the waves scream outside, let my own name echo in the space where his almost was. That was the first time I knew what it meant to be seen, not as an obligation, not as a replacement, but as someone whose silence could be chosen. I had never played piano. Not properly. Not with both hands, not the way people do when they think anyone is listening. But that morning, after the night he let me rest against him without holding me, I walked into the parlor and laid my fingers on the keys. They were cold, stiff. Some stuck, others rang too long, like they didn't know when to stop. I pressed one D, then another F. The sound wasn't beautiful, but it was real. The lid of the piano creaked when I opened it fully. Inside, everything looked clean until I saw a faint gouge across the inside rim, just beneath the strings. Not a crack, not wear, a scar. Someone had taken something sharp to the wood, not to break it, but to leave a mark. It wasn't accidental. It wasn't repairable. I touched it not with reverence, but curiosity. What kind of silence needs to be carved? I didn't hear Lucien come in, but I felt him, shift in air, that impossible stillness he carried like he'd learned how to move without asking permission from the space he entered. You found it. I didn't turn. You left it. A pause. Then he moved beside me, slow, not close, but close enough that I could smell the faintest scent of him. Leather, salt, paper. She did that, he said. Before she left, she said the piano always sounded too perfect, like it didn't know what real pain was. I let my fingers drift down the keys again, and you kept it. I keep everything I can't forgive. There was no bitterness in his voice. Just fact, like memory was a kind of architecture, and scars were how you made it stand. I closed the lid gently, careful not to let it slam. You don't play anymore? Not since she carved it. Why? Because now every note echoes something I didn't say. That stopped me. I looked up. What didn't you say? He held my gaze. This time he didn't turn away. That I wanted her to stay. That I would have changed. That loving her scared me, but losing her terrified me. A silence opened between us, not empty, dense, and me. I asked, You haven't left yet? He walked to the window, pressed his palm to the fogged glass. I don't know how to speak in real time, Clara. I only ever confessed to ghosts. That afternoon, I didn't eat. I didn't leave the parlor. I sat beside the piano and stared at the gouge. I imagined her hands holding the blade, dragging it slow. Steady like a promise, like a curse. Lucian didn't come back that night. No kettle whistled. No boots passed my door. I should have felt abandoned. Instead, I felt uncovered like grief had opened him a fraction. And I had looked too far inside Dot near midnight. I returned to the parlor, lit the candle on the mantel, let it bleed warm light over the polished lid, and I played. Only 4 notes. A tune I remembered from somewhere soft, maybe my mother's kitchen, or a dream too old to date. I didn't know the melody, but I let it live. Each note felt like a letter I'd never written. Each pause was its own confession. The next morning, the piano was open. Not the lid, the inside. A single page of sheet music lay over the keys. Not printed, handwritten, title, for Clara. No signature, but I didn't need one. Later that day, I found Lucian on the garden path, staring at the cliff's edge. The wind tore at his coat. The sea threw itself upward like it wanted him to fall. He didn't hear me approach. I played it. I said. He didn't look back. I know. Did it sound like a ghost? No, he said quietly. It sounded like someone who's still here. I stepped beside him. Why write it for me? Because you played the piano, even with the scar in it? He turned. His eyes were tired, but no longer hiding. And maybe, he said, I need someone who can love what's been cut. That night, I didn't leave my door open. I left it half closed. Not a test, not an invitation, just a space. A maybe. And before I fell asleep, I heard it again, footsteps. Not approaching, lingering. A presence not asking to be let in, just waiting to be chosen. The letter arrived with the morning fog slipped under my door like a secret, too tired to wait until breakfast. No stamp, no seal. Just my name written in a hand I hadn't seen in years. Jane. My sister. I sat on the floor, knees bent beneath my nightgown, and stared at the envelope as if it might vanish if I blinked. She had been gone 5 years. No forwarding address. No goodbye. Just absence and 1,000 imagined reasons why. The letter was short. Clara, I heard about the wedding. If you can still call it that. I'm at St. Augustine's retreat in Maine. If you want out, say the word. There's room here for you. I won't ask questions, just come. Jane. No apology, no explanation. But then again, when have we ever needed those? We were born into silence, raised on it. I didn't go to breakfast. I didn't touch the piano. I sat on the window seat of the eastern room, staring at the sea, and felt something unravel, something I hadn't even realized I'd woven around myself. A future here, with Lucian. Or maybe near him. I wasn't in love. Not yet, but I was becoming. Something in this house. Something slow and steady in mine. And for the first time in my life, No one was telling me who I had to be to stay Dot by noon. I found him outside. Lucian stood where the cliff bent outward, his coat drawn tight, eyes narrowed against the salt wind. He heard my steps before I spoke. Got a letter, I said. Dot, he turned. Unreadable. From someone who left, I added, they want you back. They want me somewhere I can choose myself. He was quiet. Then, you can choose here too. Can I? He met my eyes. You think I kept you, didn't you? The words didn't come out cruel, just honest. Like a wound pressing gently against skin, testing whether it still hurt. Lucian stepped closer, but not close enough to touch. I asked you. To stay once, I won't ask again. His voice was calm. That was what gutted me. Not anger. Permission. That night, the house felt different. Not colder, not darker. Just quieter, like it knew something was about to be lost. I walked the hallway slowly, stopping at the study, the piano, her room. Each one said nothing. Each one waited Dot in the kitchen. The kettle was warm, but no tea had been made. He was making space for my leaving, and that made it worse. Dot back in the eastern room. I packed slowly, not because I wanted to go, but because I needed to know what it felt like to almost leave. I folded the coat he gave me, the poetry book, the matchbox. Then I stopped. There was something under the bed box, plain, wooden, no lock. Inside, a photograph, old, sepia-toned. 2 girls, maybe 10 and 12, standing in front of a bakery. One of them was me, the other Jane. Behind the photo, a note. Lucian's handwriting again. I asked someone to find her, just in case you ever wanted to. I sat on the floor, hands trembling. He hadn't spoken, hadn't tried to win me. He'd just given me the way out before I even asked. I didn't sleep. At dawn, I walked the garden path one last time. The grass was wet, the sea quieter. He was there, Lucian, at the cliff's edge. Same coat, same silence. You knew I'd come, I said. I was hoping you would, to say goodbye. He didn't answer. I moved closer, close enough to smell that blend of old books and seawater I'd come to memorize. If I leave, I whispered, what will you do? Keep the lights on. That broke something. Inside me, not loudly. Just a quiet fracture. I reached for his hand. This time, he let me. His fingers were cold, but closed around mine like something remembered. I'm not choosing her, I said. Not yet. Then who are you choosing? Me. His thumb moved once, slowly, across my knuckles. That's the right answer. We didn't kiss. We didn't say stay. We just stood there, 2 people at the edge of something that didn't name yet. When I returned to the room, I unpacked only the book and placed it on the windowsill. Still open. Still mine. There are 2 kinds of silence, one that protects, and one that punishes. I had lived most of my life in the second. After my mother died, our house had filled with the sound of things left unsaid. My father stopped speaking to me in full sentences. Jane ran Dot instead of grieving. I stayed. Staying doesn't mean strength. Sometimes it just means you have nowhere else to go. The door was locked. Not hers, mine. The eastern room. Dot at first, I thought it was stuck, but the knob wouldn't turn. Not even halfway. I stood in the hallway barefoot, hair still damp from a storm I hadn't known was coming. Wind tore at the windows. The sea below groaned Dot, and then I heard a voice, soft, familiar, from the other side of the door. You shouldn't have stayed. My breath hitched. You're not her. He'll leave you too. I stepped back. The voice wasn't real. Couldn't be. But it sounded like someone I hadn't heard in years. Jane. Not her grown voice. Her childhood one. The one that used to crawl into bed with me after bad dreams and whisper, "Don't tell Dad." I moved down the hall fast, unthinking, to the only door I hadn't opened since the night I found the piano's scar. Her room. Lucian's ghost. The one he let walk out. The one I tried not to become. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Nothing had changed: dust, a covered chair, the coat behind the door. But there on the floor was something new. A photograph curled up the edges, discarded. I picked it up. My mother. Not young, but not sick yet. She stood beside a man, not my father. Taller, darker. The background was unfamiliar, but the expression on her face wasn't. She was smiling softly. Not for the camera. For him. I carried the photo to the study. Lucian was there, of course. He always was when I needed him least and most. Did you know her? I asked, holding out the picture. He took it carefully, looked once, blinked. She used to come here, before it was mine, before I could afford to own anything. Why didn't you tell me? Because she wasn't your story. He handed it back. No explanation, no secret spilled, just dignity. And the heavy pause of someone who knows grief doesn't always come from loss. Sometimes it comes from knowing. That night, I couldn't sleep. The voice didn't return, but the feeling did, like someone was knocking. Not to be let in, but to remind me they'd once lived here. I sat by the window and thought about doors. About how easy it was to close one and think you'd ended something. But echoes don't die in silence. In the morning, I packed again. Not to leave, to walk. Lucian met me at the garden gate. Where are you going? He asked, not possessive. To study. To see if I'm still afraid. Of what? Of what's mine. I walked the edge of the cliff until the wind no longer chilled me. Then I turned back, not to the house, not to Lucian. To the eastern room. The door was still closed, but this time it opened easily. Inside the room was warm. Some light leaked in through the window. On the desk sat the poetry book, my matchbox, and a letter. Not Jane's, not Lucian's. My mother's. I opened it with shaking hands. Clara, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't keep the promise I made. That I'd always be there when you woke up from a bad dream. But I want you to know something I never said aloud. You were never meant to stay small to survive. You don't have to be quiet to be safe. You are not here to carry your silences. Leave if you must, but don't run. Walk, choose, and when you stand, still again, let it be because you love where you are, not because you were afraid to go. Mom, I didn't cry. Not yet. But something loosened in my chest, something old, something I hadn't even realized I kept in a drawer inside myself, labeled too heavy. That evening, I went to Lucian. He didn't speak, just looked at me like a man watching someone he expected to vanish. I'm not going anywhere, I said. He exhaled slowly. Why? Because this time I opened the door myself, and there was no ghost behind it. Just me. He reached